Right, greetings everybody. Robin here from Courage is the Cure. Welcome to episode 131 of Relentless, first episode for 2026. Today we're going to be talking about Norfolk Island's historic election with Peter Bailey. I will see you all in a jiffy. All right, greetings everybody. Like I said, welcome to episode 131 of Relentless, first one in 2026. Today we're going to be joined by Peter Bailey, all the way over there on Norfolk Island, to talk about an historic election that was held on the 1st of January 2026, New Year's Day. As I said, my guest today on Relentless is Peter Bailey, and it's my great pleasure to welcome him to Relentless. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Hey, Robin. Thanks for your time. We'll just make a slight correction. Christian Bailey, hyphenated surname.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Good.
Where did I get that from then? That's terrible. Usually well, that's my misstep. Usually I do double check people's names before we go live. Well, there you go.
It was partly right. Bailey, right?
So just for everybody, I'm just going to pop up on the map before we get into talking about Norfolk Island and the election that I just talked about. For people in Australia and also our international viewers, I'm just going to pop a map on stage for everybody's perusal. You can see there on the left-hand side of the screen the east coast of Australia, of course, Melbourne, Canberra and Sydney, and good old Tasmania, Queensland there. Of course, New Zealand over the water, Tasman Sea, and we do have Norfolk Island, which is part of Australia, isn't it, Peter?
Well, our official classification is really an external territory under the authority
of the Australian government.
Of Australia, yeah. So what basically happened in 1914 was, without diving into it too far, is that we were placed under the authority of the Commonwealth of Australia. So in effect, administrative authority was transferred, but sovereignty wasn't. So this has been since 1914, it's been a bit of a battle between Australian domestic law and our constitutional continuity. So, yeah.
So what?
Yeah, sorry.
Terribly sorry. No, that's okay. So I think I'll ask you about the difference between authority and sovereignty. But before we get on to that, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Well, my name's Peter Christian Bailey. Obviously, Robin's just said that I live on Norfolk Island, which is a little island, pretty much, it's about 35 odd square kilometres in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We're pretty much, if you draw a cross between Sydney and Fiji and Auckland and New Caledonia, we're basically the X. So obviously I've been brought onto this podcast as a result of a recent election that we've had on Norfolk Island, which is an election which has been based on our own constitutional beginnings it's a government that has had constitutional continuity since 1838. So although different administrative functions have been involved in the island, right to self-government has always been there. And after a period of turmoil on the island, probably at least 10 years, since 2015, the island has decided that enough is enough, and we're going to reaffirm our right to hold our own elections through direct democracy from our own people, from those who are invested in the island, to form a government. And obviously, this government is starting out with fairly humble beginnings. But we've got an absolutely fantastic team on board who are willing to take it from humble beginnings and forward into the future.
So just thinking about, the government and governance of there about authority, sovereignty, and the right to self-government.
Determination. The right to self-determination, yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously, like any nation, there's a kind of timeline when things happen. But in particular, the Australian government, if I am correct, I do believe that I think it was it 2015, the Australian government abolishes the Norfolk Island Legislative Council.
Yeah.
Assembly, excuse me, yeah. And then 2016, the Norfolk Island Regional Council was established. And then in 2021, that Norfolk Island Regional Council, the NIRC, was suspended due to governance and financial issues. And then, of course, the Australian government has come out or announced a new plan for the Norfolk Island Assembly. Can you expand on that a little bit more for the audience, just to get a grasp of the recent history as far as that's concerned on Norfolk Island?
Yes, so sure. So since 1940, I mean, it depends how far you want to go back. So obviously since 1914, Norfolk Island was handed over to the administration of Australia as a territory under the authority of Australia. So that was using, I don't know how technical you want me to go, but we can say that it was made a territory under Section 122 of the Australian Constitution. So that's how we were governed. So that's the same provisions that places such as Papua, Nauru, for example, were governed under, as they were governed as external territories, or basically administrative arrangements, as relics of the former British Empire, as what you might like to say decentralisation. And there's countless examples of these sort of places around the Pacific. You've got places like Samoa, or as a crude example, and dominions of New Zealand, which had the same constitutional beginnings as Norfolk, where they, because of the breadth of the British Empire, they were more or less decentralised into these, like such as New Zealand and Australia, to govern these places as external territories, as distinct places. So Norfolk Island was treated as a distinct and separate settlement, as external to Australia under Australian administration, right up until 2015. So everybody knows, to go back a little bit, Norfolk Island was given self-government back in 1979. A lot of people would argue that that wouldn't be construed as proper self-government. It was a form of self-government where all the power and all the decisions ultimately rested with the vice-regal position, which would have been the minister in Canberra, or through the, for example, the Assembly. So that was basically self-government under a piece of Australian legislation, which was the 1979 Act. So self-government was abolished in 2015. The reasons that were given were financial reasons, and things such as they maintain that services weren't comparable to Australian level services, which we highly argue. Like when you're talking about service delivery, you can we wouldn't say they were better or worse than Australian services. They were different, and they were suited to Norfolk Island circumstances. So obviously where we're at now, after the Legislative Assembly was abolished in 2015, we had an imposed regional council, which is basically a local government body, same as what you would find in Australia, like a local government area. So as an external territory, Norfolk wasn't afforded access to state level representation and very, very minimal federal level representation. So for example, for federal purposes, we were lumped into the seat of Bean, which has got an electorate of, as a wild guess, 120,000 people. So you can imagine 1,000 voters suddenly being lumped into a seat of Bean, which is an electorate around Canberra. So you can basically say we're 1% of the electorate of Bean, and we get even less representation from them. So it's basically meaningless, and we've got about as much in common with Bean as what chalk and cheese have. So obviously this imposed model, this regional council model, I'm glad you told me the date because I would have forgotten, but I think it was around about 2015. This imposed regional council was also abolished, put into administration, I should say, not abolished, under the same, for very much the same reasons as the Legislative Assembly was abolished, financial reasons and a whole lot of sort of administrative problems. So we've basically been without any representation since 2020. So what has now come about is that the Minister for Territories, which is basically our vice-regal delegate, has now had, I think she issued it about 2 or 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or might have been late last year. Yeah, I'm losing track of time, sorry. But so a year or two ago, she issued what they call an inquiry into governance, and a governance inquiry into Norfolk Island, and the title of the inquiry was called Restoring Democracy. So lo and behold, we had an election here to elect representatives, local representatives on that body. And as it turned out, the successful candidates were all people who were very pro-self-determination for Norfolk Island and pro-autonomy, pro-self-government. So what's actually happened with this process is that all the information coming from the community-driven model has all been filtered, deemed out of scope, deemed not foundational, irrelevant to the inquiry. The recommendations have gone to Canberra, and the decision that's come back is unrecognisable from what the community actually asked for. So in effect, what has happened with this new model that they've announced that is going to be imposed on Norfolk is a continuation of local government. Instead of the regional council, which was under applied New South Wales law, this new local assembly is operating under applied Queensland law. So it's still a local government body with very limited lawmaking power, and all the rights, all the democratic deficits, all the administrative things, and the debt will be from the regional council is going to carry over into this new assembly model. So basically, they've imposed another system and they've fixed absolutely nothing. So people here have basically come to the point where they've had enough, and they said, the good thing about all the imposed systems that we've had over the years is that we've really come to a really clear understanding of what our rights are and what we are entitled to. So we are now decided to reaffirm self-government under the 1838 Pitcairn Constitution, which the Pitcairners brought to Norfolk Island as a self-governing people. And when they came to Norfolk Island, self-government wasn't recognised by the British Crown. It wasn't given to the people, it was recognised. So once you've got a constitution and once you've got recognised rights, nothing can overturn that unless it's got the consent of the people. So ever since 1838, ever since the arrival of the Pitcairners in 1856, which are the backbone of the community even today, not once in our history has anybody bothered to say, what model of governance would you like? How would you like? Everything since then has absolutely been imposed, shoved down our face, and that's part of the reason for the 160 odd years of absolute, failure after failure of imposed systems. So I believe that this operating under the Pitcairn Constitution is basically a clean slate for us, and it's an absolute chance and opportunity for people here. Although it's from a constitution from 150, 200 years ago, the backbone of it is actually crucial in the fact it's your purest form of direct democracy. It's the first constitution in the world that actually gave women the right to vote, and also had compulsory education. The first one in the world. It's one of the oldest constitutions in the world. So we know that from this really fantastic document, the people here can build something that is definitely can be tailored to modern Norfolk, not only the Norfolk Islanders, but to all those people who have come to the island and called Norfolk Island home. So it's a starting document, and we're going to go out and modernise it. We are going to build administrative structures that are suitable to Norfolk, and we're going to start out small, but dream big. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about your description there, of imposed systems for 160 years, and the Minister for Territories doing the inquiry to restore democracy. In this day and age, we know that 9 times out of 10 things that come out of ministerial mouths are usually the opposite. And I've been covering councils across Australia quite extensively throughout 2025, and there's something that keeps reoccurring, whether it's in Western Australia or New South Wales, Tasmania, Queensland, this dismantling of democracy, and it takes place and rears its ugly head in many different ways, but one in particular is this lack of community consultation. And you just mentioned there that any of the recommendations and thoughts and all of those types of things from the people of Norfolk Island were not taken on board in regards to this report for the Ministry of Territories. Would it be a fair statement that even there, over in the middle of the ocean there, that there seems to be a dismantling of democracy, if you like, especially when you have a Minister for Territories wanting to do an inquiry to restore it?
Well, definitely, that's been I think what happened in 2015 wasn't something that they dreamed up the week before. This was something that they've been probably working towards since at least the mid-90s, I would say. There's just been sort of little encroachments on things, and when Norfolk got into a little bit of financial trouble, what they done a series of what they call funding agreements, which was basically forcing the Norfolk Islanders to do the legislature here to do the dirty work to prepare them. They were ultimately done in 2015, which was completely abolished. So what they done in 2015 was undoubtedly against international law, and it was against actually common decency to do what they've done. So what has happened since 2015 is what was done under the guise of financial sustainability. Norfolk Island was costing the Australian government somewhere between $3 or $4 million per year in budgetary assistance, only for the 3 or 4 year period before the abolition. Before then, Norfolk Island absolutely never went in the red. It ran balanced budgets. So what has ultimately cost would have cost the Australian government initially to get us back on their feet was 3 or 4 million per year. Since 2016 or 15 to now, it's estimated that the Australian government has spent in the vicinity of $1 billion on the island for a population of 2,000 people for absolutely dismal results. And if I was an Australian taxpayer, I would be asking questions.
Why has it been just such a failure? Why is the Australian government and their implementations of the NIRC and all these sorts of things been a complete failure? Why can't they manage to balance the books, if you like?
So obviously the main tenet of democracy is that all decisions are actually coming from the people, not from remote control bureaucrats who live in Canberra. So when they're making a decision, their imagination is very limited. For starters, sitting from an office, their actual understanding of the place is near non-existent. They seem to think that mainland systems, or I shouldn't use the word mainland, sorry, but Australian systems that are suited for Australia can be basically overlaid onto Norfolk Island. So what's happened since 2015 and probably before is it's just created huge inefficiencies, huge bureaucratic costs, huge wastage in programs and initiatives that are just ill-suited for an island with a distinct constitutional history that was only treated as part of Australia since 2015 purely by the stroke of a pen when the Australian government decided to amend their Interpretation Act. So with one foul swoop of a pen, they were able to change the definition of Australia in their Interpretation Act to include Norfolk Island. So with one minor amendment, all Australian government policy referred to Norfolk Island as an integral part of Australia. So when you're trying to govern a place on fabrication and not on truth, obviously you're going to get dismal results. When decisions aren't coming from the people, you're going to get dismal results. You're going to get wastage, you're going to get poor service delivery, you're going to get an unhappy population, you're going to have a disempowered population who are eventually going to turn around and say, we've had enough.
Isn't it? I mean, I'll go back to local councils again. Just what's happened here? I'll go back to local councils again, just a point of reference. I know certainly where I live in Western Australia, the last council election, you've got people that can run for your area that don't actually live in your area, right? And I'm a bush lady, and the bush in Western Australia, I mean, you can drive 15, 20 Ks, and the circumstances, the way that people live, things that are important are very different, even just 20 kilometres away. And we don't feel like we have proper representation from our councillors when they live 20 kilometres away. I mean, let alone have an island nation that is very, very far away from Australia, obviously has different needs and priorities, has different, self-government, all these sorts of things. And for some, bureaucrat, if you like, perhaps, or parliamentarian to do a box-ticking exercise which has such a dramatic impact on a group of people who live on Norfolk Island, just astounds me. But in the same breath, it doesn't, because we cop that in local council in Australia,
Can I just add that I was not aware that you didn't actually have to live in the area to stand for it. I was aware that at a federal level that the different parties plan different candidates in different electorates, which I think is just crazy, and I don't know why people accept that, to be honest. But one of the beautiful things about this constitution is that obviously there's elements of our constitution that I believe need modernising. But one of the good things is that to stand as a candidate, not only do you have to live on the island, you have to be there on the day. You have to have 5 years continual residence on the island. So that to me, demonstrates that the people who are elected to these positions have an invested interest in the place, and they also actually have a proper understanding of the places and the decisions and the needs that the community wants. So for the life of me, I can't see how anybody would even have the gall to stand in an electorate that they're not from, for starters. And number two, actually think they're going to give the community there any sort of decent representation.
So I'm glad you brought that up. One of the positive things, such as living on the island for 5 years. I might just show some pictures while you talk, but can you talk to us about, because we want to move on to the historic election that was held on the 1st of January this year. But before we get there, can you talk about the Constitution and what are the good things about it, and what's going on here? I'll just pop some pictures up on the stage of beautiful Norfolk Island while you tell people about that.
So for sure. So we can go right back. Obviously, a lot of the listeners, I was going to say viewers, listeners, might be aware of the mutiny on the Bounty story. So what basically happened? It was a British naval mutiny out at sea. So what they'd done, they overthrew the captain of the ship. They went to I'm saying it really, really simply. So they went to Tahiti, picked up some Tahitian wahine, some girls, picked up some wives on Tahiti after they mutinied and bought them, and they had to escape the clutches of the British Empire. So they ended up hiding out on Pitcairn Island, which was a little island in the French Polynesian area, but not actually in French Polynesia. That was sort of uncharted, sort of off the map. So that was a bit of a hideout for them. So you've got the Polynesian women and the Englishmen. So they built up a bit of a community. And in 1838, after a period of lawlessness and sort of a little bit of anarchy between the people, they developed what they were called a set of rules and sort of guidance, which became known as the Pitcairn Constitution. So that was what the Pitcairn community, when they outgrew Pitcairn Island, this constitution and self-government was recognised by the British Crown, and they brought this with them when they moved to Pitcairn Island, to Norfolk Island in 1856. So this constitution was with the people. It's never actually been abrogated. It's never been rescinded. It's just been ignored. So obviously, in 1914, administrative arrangements changed, but a constitutional continuity didn't change. So I'm just trying to backtrack on what specifically you were asking about the.
Well, just because you were pointing out one of the good things about the Constitution, and because I was referencing local councils and people who don't even live in the area can enrol themselves to represent and have everybody vote for them, which is just nuts.
Yeah, so obviously, I'm getting back to what you were asking. So one of the great things about it is anybody who is eligible to stand has to be really invested in the island, and anybody who votes also has to be invested in the island. One of the first things that we plan to do as a new government is to modernise the Constitution, because at present, one of the first things we want to do, because we've got a lot of people now who live on Norfolk Island who are truly invested in the community and have come from afar, come from Australia, New Zealand, Britain, all over. We've got other Pacific Islanders living on the island. presently you have to stand for election, you have to be native born and on the island for 5 years. So one of the first things we want to change is not having to be native born and not having to be a native of Norfolk as in a Pitcairn descendant. So obviously for this initial election, the candidate pool was probably narrower than it could have been because of those stipulations. But one of the priorities for this term of office is to actually modernise it, to make it so that you don't have to be born here and you just have to have been here 5 years. So that's one of the things that we can really do to bring the whole island with us.
Yep. So, what a gorgeous place. When I was looking at all the aerial photos before speaking to you today, I thought, gee whiz, what a beautiful place. So on the 1st of January 2026, this year, there was an election held. So we'll move on to that now, and I guess what triggered it. But I just want, before we get into it, I just want to clear up for people and ask you, was and is this election recognised by Canberra?
No, they haven't said they recognise it. They haven't said they don't recognise it. I think they're choosing to ignore it. And my opinion is they're probably just watching with a bit of trepidation to see what unfolds. So I think they know that we've got the right to do it for starters, and probably know that they're pretty much stuffed up in the last few years, and there's pretty much been a one-sided sort of ambush in the last 10 years could have really and truly been a win-win situation for Australia and Norfolk Island. So, the cost to Australia could have been significantly less with local solutions and local way of doing things, and
Perhaps,
to a local scale.
perhaps there might be a little bit of I might suggest that perhaps there might be a little bit of embarrassment on the Australian government's behalf, because I think, as we're going to talk about now, perhaps this election demonstrates Norfolk Islanders restoring your own democracy when the Australian government seems pretty terrible at it. That's just my opinion. What triggered this election? How did it come about? Because it was a matter of days ago, as I said, on the 1st of January. What triggered that election?
I'll quickly get back to your point before I answer this one about the Australian government embarrassed. I think they damn well should be embarrassed, because while they're trotting around the Pacific trying to build up regional diplomacy and tell everyone, the good guys in the region, that you should trust us and enter into these negotiations, what they should also tell people that they should practice what they preach in regards to Norfolk Island. So if they want to build up any sort of regional respect, especially with the fear of China in the background, then they've got to probably change their attitude to how they handle territories. Constitutionally, sort of separate territories under their administrative control, they should actually start practicing what they preach, because the region notices. They do notice. Mm-hmm. And so getting back to the election, so this has been traditionally the Pitcairn Constitution. The way it worked is, what you have is you've got the head of government, which is the magistrate, which is a position that I've been elected to. And then you have an elected councillor. So it basically goes, the highest poller becomes the magistrate, the second highest becomes the councillor. So these terms are very old terms. So when you think of magistrate, you might think of it in a legal sense, but at the time, a magistrate could have quite a wide meaning, and also meaning a head of government as well, which it did in our context. So on top of that, we also have, under the provisions of the Constitution, we have an appointed councillor too. So we've now assembled our team of 3 people. So leading up to the election, the team announced about 5 weeks ago, only 5 weeks ago, that this has all been, I won't say brought about, but it's been endorsed by what we have on the island, which a lot of Pacific Island bodies have, is what they call a council of elders or a council of chiefs. So this body actually supported and gave the process its blessing. So traditionally, it would be the predecessor, the old magistrate, would be the one who would be sort of bringing in, authorising the new government. So in the absence of 100 odd years of having no government on the island, this role then defaulted to our council of elders. So they're the ones who helped to facilitate the election, which I must say was done absolutely impeccably, 100% transparently. And they were in effect the ones who facilitated it and endorsed it. But there was a really wonderful team of community volunteers, because the community here was really, really invested in this. Have been through a bit of a rough time with such uncertainty, such, just our rights just being told, it doesn't matter what we think, you lump it whether you like it or not. So what's basically happened is, the election occurred on the 1st of January, so that's traditionally New Year's Day when they held it, and I was sworn in along with the other two councillors on Thursday night on the 1st, and here we are.
Before we went live, Peter, we were talking about the numbers, because the population, if my memory serves me from our conversation, population of Norfolk Island is about 2,188 people. Yeah. And I was asking you about the vote itself. So we've touched on the criteria for people that are running, but perhaps you can talk about those two things together. How many people voted out of how many possible electors? And of course, within that, you'll be able to talk about the criteria to vote in the election.
This election was a lot more stringent than other elections that they have on the island. So Norfolk's got a population of around about 2,188 people. When you're talking about the number of eligible people who could vote, I'll get back and say this was a purely voluntary thing to do. It wasn't compulsory to vote. So we've got 500 people under the age of 18. So one of the criteria is to be over 18. And then also one of the criteria is you had to have been on the island for 5 years. That's to vote. So we're talking about the voting. So the absence of any sort of proper statistics that we really had, because obviously our immigration regime was taken away in 2015 and it was open immigration, which is a real point of contention. I don't mean to be sidetracked, but anyway, so you could probably read that the number of eligible voters. The other provision that you had to have was you had to be on the island on the day to actually vote. There was no postal votes, no pre-polling, none of that. So you can probably have a fairly reasonable, it's a pretty reasonable suggestion or sort of thing to say that using our old immigration records of what our transient population is, you could probably reasonably say that the number of eligible voters was around between 900 to 1,100 people. So of that, we had, I think it was about 682 people. So around about 75% of the eligible population did exercise their democratic right. A lot of people there was a little murmuring, quite a bit of murmuring around the community that probably put few people off who would have liked to have voted. There was a bit of a nonsense suggestion that if you voted in this election, that your health services or your education were going to be cut off, which is a bit of a scare tactic. But I think we've done a fairly good job of telling people that, that these sort of services are statutory and parliamentary things. It can't just be sort of enacted depending on your political sort of preference or anything. It takes an act of parliament or a statutory thing to actually do that. And people can't say that, that this citizen here can get education, but you can't. So that was a nonsense scare tactic. So I think our community is wise enough to have seen it. But anyway, regardless, we got a fantastic turnout. When you're talking about raw numbers, it was probably in terms of eligible, it was probably higher than what any federal election would have got. Or when you consider the election that they had here, they had 360 people vote on the day.
It's astounding, that you've just said over 70% of people voted. Now, considering, and before we started talking about the election, that, there was a specific reason why I asked you, has Canberra recognised this election? And that's not to undermine what the people of Norfolk did on the 1st of January, or any kind of authority or lack thereof or recognition, whatever. It's because this number here of, over 70% of people voted, when they know that Canberra's ignoring it for whatever reason they are ignoring it.
So I'll just validate that by saying that's like a reasonable assumption. As I said, we don't have the raw numbers, but I think that's a fairly reasonable estimate to have, but without quoting me exactly on the figures, it would have been in that figure. Yeah.
Well, what it says is that if the people, I would suggest that if the people of Norfolk Island hadn't had it up to the back teeth of, imposed systems and, not being listened to, a complete lack of community consultation, all these sorts of things, not being paid attention to by the Ministry for Territories and all these sorts of things, then not so many people would have come out on the 1st of January to vote.
We'd have no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's a.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
So as I said, every single administrative arrangement that Norfolk has had in the last 100 odd years has been imposed. So everything was being absolutely shoved down our face, and it gets to the point when they begin to wonder why things don't work here, why things that they put in here don't work, why. But I suppose this is just another example of if you actually bring it back to the people and you honour the constitutional origins, and you just do the right thing, and it's community driven. Because one of the beauties about this direct democracy that we have here is the decisions come up from the people. So you get good decisions. You get decisions that are well suited. They're cost beneficial, don't waste money, and you're just being a decent human being by letting the people who have to live under the rules are the ones who actually decide. And that's not a unreasonable thing to ask in any civilized society, that those who are affected by the decisions are the ones who make the decisions.
Yep. So on the 1st of January, as we said, 2026, you did have the election, and fantastic number of people turned out. So yourself, Peter, you were voted, if I'm correct with my numbers, 522 votes, and you are now the magistrate.
Yes.
And then the next highest votes was 354 for Tim Brown, who is councillor.
Yeah.
And at the time when I was watching the coverage on the 1st, the second councillor was to be announced after consideration by yourself.
Yes.
That would have happened, has it?
Yes. The appointed councillor, or the second councillor, is Rebecca Hayes. She's a Norfolk Islander, obviously of Pitcairn descent. So I picked her because she's been involved in the space, in the self-determination space, for a long time. She's been along for the ride, and it was just a fact of wanting to take all this experience, all this corporate knowledge through with us. So obviously we've been involved in other groups which are pursuing similar things. So the idea of this government is to bring all these groups which are all pushing for the same thing, but as happens, they get sort of molded into different factions. And even though we're pushing for the same goal, is to bring them all under the one umbrella, so that we're not fighting the same battle on, half a dozen different fronts. We're fighting the one battle. We're not actually fighting a battle, as far as we're concerned. We're all putting all our energy into one place now. We're not fighting a battle. As far as we're concerned, the battle's over. We've affirmed our governance.
Yeah.
We're going to start out with no supply, no diplomatic relations, but we have got absolute determination to build these things up to a position where, we can have a real crack and make a real imprint. So, as I said, humble beginnings, but we've got an incredible amount of people on board, and will come on board, willing to help. We've got one of the first things we've got to do is obviously shape our organisational structure, develop our priorities. You've got your strategic structures, and where are you, so that everybody's moving in the same direction, but their responsibilities. Excuse me.
That's all right.
But their responsibilities are, well defined, and I think it's going to be a lean, well-oiled machine.
Yep. So after all of these years of, without a truly elected body from Norfolk Islanders, and we've already talked about, all the people turned up and chose the representatives for Norfolk Island, and as I mentioned, Canberra is not recognising this. What and it says in the banner down the bottom, title of the show, what power does it really hold? What does this actually represent? And you touched on it slightly there. What's the future, and what are the steps forward?
So the biggest power that I believe that this body holds is that it sets our expectations. That's the number one powerful thing. The number two powerful thing is that this has come from the people, and not from imposed bureaucrats sitting in their office thinking this would be good for these people here. It's truly come from the people. And the third thing is that we've got an incredible amount of talented people on the island, skilled people, a lot of people with corporate memory and corporate skills from self-government. Some of them are getting older, so we want to get this show on the road before, while they've still got the capacity to pass on their knowledge and their skills about how. So we successfully ran self-government here for 40 odd years before it was crudely shut down. So we've got the skills, we've got the support, we've got the and the number one thing we also have is the fact, when we're entering into any diplomatic relations, we can come from a position of absolute truth and absolute authority by saying, we not only are we satisfied by the requirements of international law, namely Section 15.15.14, I think, don't quote me, which says that all people have the right to self-determination, particularly those who are ethnically, culturally, and geographically distinct. Not only have we got that on our side, but we've also got, obviously, the mandate of the people. And if we're entering into diplomatic relations, we've got the truth of our constitutional continuity to back us up too. So we're not talking to different people from a faction or a group that is advocating for self-government. We are coming from one government to another. So it puts a whole new sense of sort of focus and highlight in any sort of negotiations or any sort of diplomacy that we decide to engage in.
Well, could this be, I guess, could this perhaps be viewed by Canberra, I mean, you know, how embarrassing it is that people are reclaiming their own democracy, but, you know, perhaps as a kind of pressure tactic where, you know, an unofficial election so successful as this one is pushing or nudging the government towards
Yeah,
not only recognition, but not reforming, allowing the Norfolk Islanders to govern themselves. You know, would they be feeling pressure from that, do you think?
yeah. So firstly, the way we see it, it's not an unofficial election at all. It's a it's a legal process conducted under our own constitution. Of course, it's not a statutory recognised Australian election, but in saying that, we, we, as I said, we're not advocating to cut ties with Australia or independence. So what we want is a respectful relationship with Australia, where they actually recognise us as, you know, as the distinct people, and as I explained before, the relationship between Australia and Norfolk could be an absolute win-win situation. Australia could have their geopolitical needs met, and we could have our sovereign rights met at the same time. It does not have to be this sort of ambiguous thing where they don't know how to treat us. Why don't they just treat us under the truth? It's not that hard. It doesn't mean they have to give away their geopolitical or their, you know, no, we're not unreasonable people here. You know, we're willing to work with anyone. You know, so that's exactly the way I see it. It's a win-win situation. It depends whether they want to continue on with this colonial "bloody do as I say, not as I do" nonsense, or whether they really want to be a genuine partner.
Well, you know, just watching Port Hedland Council in Western Australia, I mean, that council was the council itself and the mayor and the councillors was dismissed
Yeah,
last year, and they brought in 3 commissioners to run the council. There's another council in Western Australia, same thing happened there. Again, you know, another example of dismantling of democracy. You know, besides the kind of, you know, residual colonial thinking, you know, that may or may not, people can discuss that amongst themselves, still remain within our government systems and how we operate. What are your thoughts as to why, especially after, you know, you have had this election with over 70% voting, why do you think it is that the Australian government won't let, you know, Norfolk Islanders and similar have self-determination and have your own governance and all of these things? What's up
I
with
like
that?
this fairly, I can probably say this fairly bluntly. Obviously, you had Papua and Nauru were governed under the same provisions, so we basically have got the same constitutional status as what, or were governed under the same provisions that places like Papua, which went on to become Papua New Guinea and Nauru. So it probably comes down to what, in essence, is how international law and international, you know, things work. Is that it's not necessarily what's the right thing to do. It's what's the most politically convenient thing to do. So I'll hazard a guess that for a place like Papua, Australia probably made a purely rational economic decision to say, we can extrapolate for Papua New Guinea what we like without actually having to fund, you know, the whole breadth of services that Australian citizens get. So therefore you get independence, but we'll still keep a pretty tight noose around, you know, mineral rights and mining leases and still, you know, keep them in our sphere. For a little place of like Norfolk Island with 2,500 people, it was probably a much easier decision economically and cost-wise to say, okay, you know, bugger, you know, it's cheap enough to take you on completely and ignore your rights. We'll just take you over completely. We'll just ignore the fact that you've got the same constitutional rights and rights to international law and human rights as what popular, but this is more politically convenient for us to treat you this way rather than the way that you afforded Papua New Guinea. They're right to choose their own future. Or, as an example, that's what it comes down to, in my opinion.
Yeah,
it's a business.
And bugger the people.
Yes.
So you now have your team assembled, as I said, with yourself being voted in as magistrate, and that was 522 votes.
Yep.
People need to pay attention to that, and I hope the Australian government. I'm sure they're aware. So you have your.
I think
you
they
have
go
your
to.
team assembled.
Sorry. Yeah, that's one of the first things is building up the team. Obviously, getting the appointed counsellor, which I'm pretty happy with that decision, and we've obviously got the people that we trust and rely on for advice anyway within our everyday lives. And as I mentioned before, one of the first things is to get our house in order, get our proper channels of communication going. Media outreach, social. So as we're not completely set up for like the communication channels aren't completely developed yet. All that sort of thing, housekeeping. Obviously, our organisational structure, we're going to start out as a lean machine. So we're in the process of developing out how the actual government and all the bubbles around the government are going to function. So it's going to start out lean, but definitely with the view to grow into further responsibilities. We've got some great initiatives ahead of us. We've got some great people on board, and I think one of the first priorities in conjunction with these other initiatives is actually a series of constitutional changes. So we're going to dedicate the first year to modernising the Constitution, which is 100% in line with the people. So everything will be down to ballot. And with the age of technology we're in today, there's absolutely no excuse that anywhere can't gain quick community consent with the apps and all the technological features. So when you're voting on an issue, it's yes or no. Simple as that. None of this backrooms under the table sort of lobbying and all this nonsense. It's purely for the people, by the people.
I've got one final question for you. You can answer it how detailed or not you would like to. We have had in Australia in the latter part of 2025, in particular, a hit piece on the ABC's Four Corners show, trying to draw connections, if you like, between so-called sovereign citizens and the freedom movement and domestic terrorists that all don't respect the government's authority. And I would suggest there is a campaign to demonise people in Australia and actually cause the general public to have a sense of fear about people who the government deems sovereign citizens, or common law sheriffs who don't recognise the government's authority, all these sorts of things. What are your thoughts about perhaps any conversations or assertions that you might be disrespecting the government's authority and the election's unauthorised and everybody that voted had no right to do so, and it doesn't mean anything? What's your reaction to that potentially being talked about?
Well, at the end of the day, we're not asking for anything that any reasonable global citizen wouldn't expect themselves. It's a right to have a say in the decisions that affect you. When you break it down, anybody in any area of Australia, anybody anywhere, and that's supposedly what the principle of the United Nations is, and one of the foundational elements is that everybody should have the right to determine their own future. Everybody should have a say or have be able to make the decisions that affect them. What we're doing isn't anything out of the ordinary. What our constitutional basis is no different to countless other territories around the world. It's absolutely no different to I could name dozens and dozens of them around the world, all the British overseas territories, all the Caribbean territories. The only difference is it's how the Australian government chooses to see it and how they choose to respect it. So we're not any Looney Tune. We're staking our rights and our reaffirmation purely on what's right and what we are 100% entitled to do. And if they want to prove otherwise, we'd love to hear it.
Yep. So if people want to get more information about your team and if they want to, it's interesting when you look for any coverage about the election, you've really got to know where to look because, of course, corporate media and your favourite search engines aren't going to tell you about it. Where can people go if they want some more information, or where's the best place to send people for that?
Initially, obviously, we had the campaign. Or don't really call it a campaign. We had the lead up to the election where we had obviously the promotion about the election. There's a Facebook page called For the People Norfolk Island, or FTP Norfolk Island. So go onto Facebook, Google For the People Norfolk Island, and there's a link to an app which you can download. And you can register your support. You can get news articles on the election. You can, register your support, which shows like a global map and where all the supporters are. Yeah, and that will probably give you a lot of information about the lead up to the election. But as I said before, we're actually in the very early stages of setting up this government. We're in the stages of setting up communication channels, getting all that sort of thing. I think that's it. You found that's the one. Yeah. Yep. So that's initially. So what I've got no doubt that when all our official sort of distribution media, Facebook and web pages and that come out, then there will definitely be a link from this to it. If not, just Google it. It should hopefully it's not too far away. But this is a very good start. To look at that. That's got all the election announcement I can see there. It's got a lot of short clips from community members supporting the election, and you can really, if you peruse this Facebook page here, it really sort of helps to sort of illustrate the mood and the breadth of support that there is for this government.
Encourage people to go along and find this video here of the election results announcement, and that's the name of the page there for people on Facebook, For the People Norfolk Island. You can go along there and find yourself some more information and keep up to date, because as I said, the corporate media and your favourite search engine won't tell you about it. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm shouting over my rooster. He's a pest outside my window. Thank you very much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. And as I said to you before our interview today, it's only because we all talk to one another across Australia that we hear about these things. And I was put in contact with you actually that way because we are put in information silos, these echo chambers that people talk about all the time, and it's only through information that we can actually arm ourselves with information and change whatever it is around us for the better. So I do appreciate you very much joining me today on Relentless, Peter.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks very much, Robin. I appreciate your time and for reaching out. And good luck, everyone.
Yes, well, please come back if you've got any updates, and thank you all in the audience for joining us, and make sure you all stay relentless, and we'll see you later. Thanks, Peter.
Watch the page, FTP, for the people. Thank you.
Fantastic. See you, everyone.